it's time to explore a new approach on ESG to attract investors. So please welcome our panelists. Moderator Seth O'Farrell, the Global Investment Reporter at FDI Intelligence. Petra Sokolova, the Investment Manager at Invent Capital. Danny Cotter, the Principal at the Wesley Group. Carolina Soto, the Investment Manager at Future Energy Ventures, and Rodrigo Sepulveda Schultz, the Founding Partner at Expon Capital. Hello, guys. The floor is yours.
Hello and welcome to this panel discussion on ESG, that elusive term we hear so much about. My name is Seth O'Farrell. I'm a global investment reporter at FDI Intelligence at the Financial Times, covering FDI and economic development. Following those introductions of our panelists, Carolina, Petra, Rodrigo, and Danny, I would like to ask each of you to give a bit of background to your firm. Carolina, why don't we start with you?
Yes, thanks for having us today. So Future Energy Ventures is the corporate investment arm of E.ON. We invest in companies building the future of energy, digitalization, and really trying to democratize, digitize how the energy system will look like in the future. So that's us.
Great. Thanks very much, Carolina. Rodrigo, could you introduce Expon Capital, please?
Sure. Expon Capital is a Luxembourg-based venture capital firm. We have about $100 million under management. We've done about 25 investments so far. We only invest in companies that can have a massive impact on the world in the sense of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So these include companies such as satellite constellations, doing weather forecasting, or Global, which is courier services creating jobs for tens of thousands of people, or WeFarm, which is a social network for farmers in the Horn of Africa.
Great. And Petra, could you introduce Invent Capital for us, please?
Sure. Hi all. My name is Petra Sokolova. I'm investment manager at Invent Capital. Invent Capital is a VC based in Prague. We are backed by a Central European Utility CEZ and by European Investment Bank. We have 240 million euros in order to invest into the clean tech space. What we are looking for startups who are actually with their solutions reducing CO2 footprint. We do invest in Europe and Israel in many sectors, as you can imagine, ranging from the energy space, going to mobility, smart city, supply chain, cybersecurity, and so on. So far, we've made 15 investments and 2 exits, one to Shell, Zonen, and the other a cybersecurity firm from Israel to Microsoft.
Thanks, fantastic. And Danny, could you introduce your company, please? The Wesley Group.
Yeah, thanks, Seth. So Wesley Group's an institutional venture capital firm based in Silicon Valley, Menlo Park. We have over $500 million US dollars under management across 4 funds. We've been investing in clean energy since 2007. We were early investors in Tesla. Steve, our managing partner, was on the board there through IPO. And very sort of thematically similar to the rest of our panelists here, looking at really investing in sort of 5 to 10 checks in energy, mobility, and industry, with some specific focus around these massive changes happening in the space. Get into it a bit.
Great. I would like to first start off by asking each of you to define ESG for me. What does ESG mean to you? And if we go back around, Danny, can we start with you?
Sure. I think for me, the most simplest form of it is looking beyond just profit margins to evaluate a company. I mean, the way we think about evaluating companies using our ESG lens is looking at more than just margin structure, economics, financials, into sort of the shape of the company, whether it's sort of the diversity of the founding team, the diversity of the overall makeup of the employee base. It's the board. It's the way that they think about building a sustainable business. And sustainable, I mean, not just looking at energy, but also looking at a persistent business where growth is at the forefront. And also just how they think about their own strategic vision into not just being sort of single-minded or profit. That's how I think about it.
Great. And Petra, coming back to you, how would you define ESG? What does it mean to you?
I guess it's very much in line what Danny has just described. I think we are living ESG in two ways. The first way is within our fund, the way how the fund is set up, the way how we operate, and then within the way how we do the investment. So looking obviously at the startups and thinking about whether this is the right investment for us. The ESG is definitely a serious topic. But looking at the fund, it's, I think, by nature, given that we are investing in the clean tech, the E part of ESG is always there in our operations as well as in the right for then when searching for companies. And the S, I think, like historically, we haven't put that much emphasis on that, but in time, it's actually improving. When we look at our fund, we have actually half the team are females. When we look at the portfolio companies, we see there the S getting stronger and stronger, and lots of companies actually getting much more diverse teams on board. In terms of G, I guess this is again quite natural that we are a regulated fund, so the way how we are set up, the G is very strong there, and whenever we invest, we try to make it stronger as well within the portfolio companies.
Fantastic. And Rodrigo, coming back to you then, please. How would you define ESG?
Well, I was lucky to start this fund with 3 other partners, and we started from a clean, white sheet of paper. So we try to find a purpose of what we were going to do with the rest of our lives, professional lives, when we started the fund. And we came across a book that was written at Singularity University by Salim Ismail called Exponential Organizations, right? And this book tracked about 100 companies that grew faster than linear growth. One of the key criteria in this book to describe how these companies grew fast was MTP. And MTP stands for Massively Transformative Purpose. Now, it studied companies that were pretty big, and it didn't really apply to the venture world. So we applied it to ourselves and said, well, why don't we invest only in companies that can have a massive impact, positive impact on the world? So for us, massive means at least 500 million people. So that's the scale of a continent. It's Europe or North America, which is where we invest, or the world. Transformative is 10x better than anything that has existed so far. So not incremental change, but disruptive change with tech. And the P, we actually based it on the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, why was this important for us? Because they have a time frame that were set around 2015 for 2030. So it's not 9 years more from now, but it fit the 10 years time frame of the fund. It spanned a lot of different areas we were interested in, which is climate change, was gender diversity, which was prosperity, which was education, which was life underwater, etc. But more specifically, and this is another book that was recently written by Roel Cohen, right? Impact, is that it's really difficult to measure or to track the impact we're having. And these UN SDGs, each one of them has between 5 and 20 target indicators that were precisely defined by the UN General Assembly. There were 196 countries that voted this. So all the investments we do actually have to have a massive, not a small, but a massive potential to impact positively one of the indicators. So in that sense, we try to contribute to make all these indicators happen by 2030. So that's what it means for us. And in our deal flow meetings every Monday, our jargon now has become no M, no T, no P, we pass. So it's not massive enough, it doesn't have disruptive technology enough, or has no purpose that we found, so we pass. So for example, anything related to ad tech, we will never do.
Great, thanks. A lot to think about. We'll come back to some of those topics and considerations later. Carolina, last but not least, how do you define ESG?
I think for me, ESG is definitely about aligning incentives. So now as an investor, or at least in the past, it should be, well, you have to look into the company that brings you the most revenues, where you can get the most return on your investment. But I think nowadays, it's really impossible to ignore what's happening around us. If you see climate change, you see big movements like Black Lives Matter, and you see a lot of also gaps in diversity and inclusion in many industries. So I think as investors, and I think everyone in the world should be really looking at ESG as the new standard for really where can you better put your money, what's gonna make the best use of it, not just what's gonna give you the most return. So you put 100 and you get 1,000,000, but also where can you make the most impact? Because if you put your money in something that it's basically not gonna even ensure that you're gonna have a future, then why put it there in the first place? So I think it's very important to look into that. And I really want to echo what Petra just said. Well, she's also part of a CVC of a utility, and we at Future Energy Ventures are also the CVC of E.ON, which is one of the largest utilities here in Germany. And we look at really what's the carbon impact of each of the investments that we do and what kind of support we can provide here. I think really decarbonization is one of the main targets that we should have. And about the S and the G, I find it personally a lot more difficult to deal with in the energy space, as we don't see so many female entrepreneurs. And also not so much diversity. I don't know if it's because of our geographical focus that we don't have so much of that deal flow incoming, or what's really the problem. I would really love to get some of your deal flow, Petra. As you said, you have a lot of diversity already in your teams and portfolio companies. So that's definitely an issue that needs to be further addressed.
Yeah, I'm afraid we are leading by example here. That is this gender diversity. That's something which is definitely in our team, but we need to really look for that when searching for portfolio companies. That's for sure the same, unfortunately.
And I wonder if we can come to you first, Petra, on whether or not, or how has the understanding of ESG changed and evolved over the course of the pandemic, do you think?
I would say that during the pandemic, and I would probably repeat what is quite clear to all of us, we got quite a big lesson learned that things can be done differently, right? So, for instance, we as Invent Capital, we are part of Leaders for Climate Action, and we are offsetting our CO2 footprint already for some time. And every year we were busy planting trees, and doing these offsets because of all the traveling and so on. But last year we didn't have to do any offsets almost because there was no traveling. So in terms of the E part, actually we became almost carbon neutral very easily, and it's doable. So that was quite a big lesson learned, that actually there are many things which are doable in this world, which is with the tech we have already in place. I would say that as well, one appreciates more the diversity within teams, the S part of ESG, because we can see that, well, whenever we look at a company, the crucial part is for sure the team. We call it the constellation of success. We need to see there the diverse team. We need to see their diverse investors around the table. But this diversity, I would say, make the teams more resilient. And this resilience is something what mattered more than ever during the last few months of the pandemics. So I don't know whether approach to the criteria changed, but for sure there were lessons learned that things can be done in a different way, and actually the standards can be reached. I would say easier than we imagined.
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit there, Petra. We'll come back to you. Danny, is that something that you've seen as well? How has the pandemic? Danny, are you still there? How has the pandemic changed ESG approaches? ESG.
Yeah, I think Petra did a good job sort of speaking to some of the micro pieces. Certainly, I think from the macro standpoint, what the pandemic has done in terms of just what I call sort of like a societal awakening to existential crisis. We have seen, across the board, and I'm not just speaking sort of with the U.S. mindset there, but a sort of global understanding of like how fragile society can be to sort of one of these existential crises. And that sort of awareness now, which has manifested over the last 15 months, I think has generally brought a lot of attention to other potential existential crises like climate change, right? And so I think from the macro standpoint, we have really seen a realization from both investors, but also some of the brightest minds in the world who are now looking at climate as a area that they need to really spend time in and bring their like intellectual horsepower to, which just makes me incredibly excited to be investing in space.
And Rodrigo, you talked about the problem with measuring ESG and how you at X1 Capital use the SDGs because they have a sort of time limit. Do you think that the pandemic has accelerated the incorporation of SDGs?
Again, I don't know how to define SDGs or whether we all share the same definition. So it's really hard to measure something that means different things to different people. The pandemic has had two big impacts. Our industry, the tech industry, usually works in waves of big disruptions, and two have happened here. The pandemic has brought forward maybe 5 to 10 years of digitization of the economy. People who did not want to go online, or businesses that did not want to trade online, users that did not want to do a few things like, have a consultation with a doctor online are actually doing that. So we've moved forward in time with the pandemic. So if we think that technology is helping bring forward, the ESGs, then definitely the pandemic has done that. The second thing that it has done is with forced lockdowns around the world, there has been an explosion of remote services that you can probably categorize in 5 or 6 different verticals. Remote entertainment used to exist, right? So you think Netflix or Spotify, etc. But remote health was not something that happened. Now it has brought in here. Remote work, that brings new challenges. Remote fitness, people doing Peloton at home, etc. Right? So everything remote maybe will mean in the future, and we still don't know, which is one of the SDGs, number 3, which is well-being. So work-life balance, less stress for everyone, access to more services for everyone in the same way wherever they are, probably is a positive benefit of this pandemic. Possibly.
Carolina, would you agree on that?
Yeah, I agree on that, but I think there's also another, let's say, consequence of the entire world being under lockdown, and it's the reduction in global emissions. So if we continue on this path, it would be really good. But unfortunately, economies need to start functioning again, and they are not near to where we need them to be to meet the targets of global warming. So there was a study that said that in order to not have a catastrophic effect on the climate, there would need to be a global lockdown every 2 years. And this is catastrophic by itself because it's not going to happen, because countries have seen that being under lockdown, it's also really bad for their economies. And I think especially if you think about the economy of India, which is now really suffering a lot from lots of COVID cases because it had to reopen because people were dying of hunger. So we need to do something here. We need to really rethink how the economy works. And this has really been an eye-opener, I think, under the lockdown, where many economies, even if you said, Rodrigo, lots of remote activities have popped up, it has only really benefited few people. And we need to work really on this social part, on how can we be more inclusive in an economy that could, even under lockdown, then work pretty well, that people can eat, that people can be well and not starve because they need to go to work.
Yeah. And so you've got like a sort of fragility on, like, you've got a wake up call on both sides. Basically, you've got a wake up call of where we're headed if we don't change things, sort of, in our infrastructure now. And at the same time, we also have a wake up call in that there's a lot that we, can do. But essentially, there's a sort of dual understanding of what global fragility looks like. I wondered if Danny, you had any other thoughts on how what are the challenges in implementing ESG or SDG related investment thesis?
I think the biggest challenge that we're facing as a group today is just data. For us, environmental and energy has been a focus in our fund for 14 years now. And so we've built up a lot of sort of proprietary data, but also just, cycles around, what specific pieces of information will enable us to make the best decision from the environmental standpoint. With the S and the G, we're emerging there. We just, in 2020, we've just launched our first basically ESG report, where we're starting to figure out what metrics to track for S and G over time, right? So it's going to be a persistent effort from our team to make sure that we have the data in our platform to just learn from first and foremost, but also start to pick out and get cycles around what makes a good investment, leveraging those pieces of information. And so, we're certainly not where we are with the E, but that's our sort of overarching effort these days is to get more data at our fingertips so we can make better decisions, around diversity and inclusion, around governance structures, around hiring and hiring management, and around sort of how do we look at sort of a comprehensive, cohesive E, S, and G strategy and not just the E part.
Mm-hmm. And Rodrigo, how do you Expon Capital sort of level up the S and the G?
Two examples. So one of the companies we invested in is a company called Glovo out of Barcelona. And when we invested 2.5 years ago, there was a big discussion in California where Danny is about Assembly Bill 5. Should we turn the gig economy workers into full-time employees and give them social benefits? At the time, California had 3.7% unemployment. In Spain, where Glovo was located, and they operated mainly in Spain, Italy, and Portugal by then, now they're in 20 countries, unemployment was 25% for the whole country, 45% for the youth that was a target for the couriers. So we invested because this company and one of the co-founders, Sasha, was heavily focused on giving minimum pay plus 15% to all workers, giving them access to work, giving them some income, being a stepping stone for their professional life. So definite, social impact here and doing tech for good with that company. In terms of G, 3 out of the 4 partners so far at our firm have gone to INSEAD's IDP, so it's the International Directors Program, which trains top executives around the world in the best practices in governance. And we try to bring all of those best practices down to our portfolio companies, right? So the 4th partner is going to attend now really soon. So we take it to heart. It's really important. And one of the main challenges we see, at least here in Europe, is that usually CEO and chairman are held by the founder. And those are 2 different roles that should be split. The CEO reports to the board reports to the shareholders, and even other co-investors here didn't understand that, or even lawyers on our side say, why are you asking for that in your term sheet? Just a very practical example. So we measure it, we track it, we implement it. We're asking our portfolio companies to come up now with their ESG reports. DOT, which is the micro mobility company operating here, it just announced a 70 million Series B, just came out with the ESG report. At Glovo, they had never measured, for example, gender diversity. Now they track it specifically, make efforts for it. So it's not going to be done tomorrow, but having people like us on board, being used as a sounding board for management to founders, helping them think through these issues as well, And for us, the framework is not ESG because I don't really know what that means, but are the UN SDGs is helpful, I think. And at least it's what's the word? Makes us feel good about what we do every day and why we get up every day to work.
Mm-hmm. And Petra, are you back?
Fulfilling. That's the word I was looking for. Fulfilling.
Petra?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, great. I was going to bring you in on the S and the G front. Could you? What are the biggest social concerns do you think that are facing the investor community in this space right now? We talked a little bit about diversity earlier.
Yeah. Well, for sure, I guess in the specific area we're investing into, gender is a very relevant topic. We are in clean tech. We are coming from the energy space. Very little female in the leadership, but as well actually in the overall teams and among the investors around us as well. So I guess this is something which is however changing. For instance, I very much like the example of Forto, an investment we did last year. It's a Berlin-based startup which is actually doing a great job in the air and ocean freight. And the very original thesis here is for sure the E part or in line with the E part because they are actually bringing transparency and visibility into the supply chain here, so that actually the CO2 footprint can be tracked and measured and eventually not only neutralized but totally decarbonized, I would say, eventually one day. So the E part here was very important when we were investing. However, it's amazing what kind of job the guys here do in terms of the social part, because logistics on itself is a business as well, which is not that much attractive for women. However, and it is a very much tech team here of 300-400 people. However, they are actually building these days very diverse team, like gender diverse team. They are managing to onboard senior tech girls, which is very surprising for me that they can do that in this very man-like space of logistics, and how they do it. That there are no special quotas for here. They just create, I would say, good conditions, and as well they make the job attractive. So it's as well not only about I would say some regulatory driven conditions, but as well how you shape the whole environment, the culture of the firm. The culture of the firm on itself is a great value proposition for both male and females, and so I would say things are improving for sure, but we have a long way ahead of us here.
And Carolina, on that long way ahead of us, do you think that there will be a greater sort of interrelation between E, S, and G? That it will no longer be divided in the way that it might have been over the past couple of years, say? I
think definitely. As I said, so there's these mega events happening around the climate change, social movements, really demanding more equality. And I've also seen that there's many funds that have let's say focused on either the E, the S, or the G. So you see a lot of female first founders or transgender funds, and you also see a lot of funds that would only invest in, let's say, more environmentally friendly or startups that could really have an impact on the environment. Maybe breakthrough energy ventures, maybe future energy ventures, actually. So I see that maybe now it's not going to be isolated, because investors would need to start reporting on O, E, S, and G. And I think one of the challenges here is really having the right data for that and the right standards, because we see to measure ESG, there's different tools that you could use. There's also different providers that could assess the impact of your portfolio. But then at the end, the important part is that this data is not only there because you need to be able to manage what you measure. Otherwise, it's just data sitting there. So as long as we really have more data and more accountability and responsibility on whatever investments that we're doing, that should be transparent and responsibly done, then we will see a convergence of the E, the S, and the G.
Great answer. Speaking about data, though, data is becoming a kind of big data is a sort of becoming a threatening term. I wondered, Rodrigo, there have been increasing concerns over cybersecurity. Should that be included in some of our ESG, SDG metrics, do you think? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, classic. It wouldn't be a panel discussion without someone saying that.
Yes, I was saying absolutely. That's the short answer. Now, why is that important? Our economy, last time I saw a report, I think it was by McKinsey, was that some economies here in Europe, where 18% of the economy were related to digital services. And the UK, I think, was way ahead at 18%, and France was about 7%. Right? But it's been increasing, and we discussed it earlier when we started. The pandemic has made it even more digital. Everything's getting connected. I have, I think, 48 IP devices connected at home, at my place. Now, the problem is, these are old devices with standard users and usernames and passwords that no one ever changes, or that have very little memory where you can update for a security breach. Okay, this is very technical. What does it mean? It means that in 2019, right, you can take over millions of bots, millions of printers, controllers, of web cameras, and use them to launch a denial of service attack. That was the Mirai attack, right? It means that nation states can take over another state, which happened with Russia and Ukraine, and bring down the power supplies, right? It means that we're susceptible to all kinds of crime, of impeachments, of inconveniences, because we're all connected, right? So our well-being, you can even shut down a pacemaker, it seems now, right? With a cyber attack. And that is not included in any of the 17 UN SDGs. It's not in there. So we're very comfortable with the framework. Whenever we go through our deal flow meetings, we go like, no M, no T, no P, for a lot of things, right? It's very easy. But whenever cybersecurity comes up, it says, oh, stop. I'm going to have a look at that. Because it's not included and impacts all of us. Now, there are three areas that really interest me in this space, because there are a lot of solutions out there and useless solutions as well. One is cars. Cars are basically now computers with wheels, right? And you've seen all this kind of YouTube demos where you can take over a Ford Cherokee or even a Tesla, make it brake when it shouldn't, or lock the screen or the windshield or whatever. There are a number of companies investing in this space, but this is going to be a major concern. Second, industrial complexes were not connected to the internet before, right? And we all know about 2007, 2008, right? When we shut down a nuclear reactor in Iran, just using cybersecurity, Stuxnet. And there are a couple of companies that have been acquired recently, like CyberX, in this space. More and more plants and industrial devices are connected to the internet, and we need to protect them. And the final one is the one I was alluding to. More and more devices in our daily lives that are unprotected, that no one updates. Either you're on Mac, you don't do your Mac updates, you don't do your Windows updates. No one does in my office, no one does it. So that's a major concern. And we should not ignore it. So for the next UN SDGs, you should add a 18th one, cybersecurity.
I wonder what everyone else thinks of that. Has cybersecurity been something that you've thought about also in terms of SDGs or ESG metrics? I mean, Carolina, we talked a little bit about the fragility of our world. This is another kind of clear point of vulnerability or potential vulnerability.
Yes, so the question was directed to me, right?
Yeah, sure, please.
Okay. Good. So yeah, actually in our portfolio, I think we have around 5 companies in cybersecurity. So at Future Energy Ventures, one of our verticals is called Future Technology. So it's something that might not be directly related to energy, so not in the energy value chain, but actually it's one of the the foundational points for how technology should work in the future. What do you need to build a decentralized energy system where you see there's going to be millions of new devices, millions of new connected cars, and it's really important to secure these. So both the endpoints, but also the connection between these devices. I think it's really important, and I totally support Rodrigo here on we need one SDG for cybersecurity. I don't even know how you want to call it. Maybe security of devices or security of the web. But I think it's very important, and that's why we also have an office in Tel Aviv, where we see there's really strength in this area. And we will continue to find these startups that are really looking to secure IoT devices and connected cars and connected buildings, because otherwise this is one of the biggest risks that we have right now.
Here during the pandemic, French hospitals, it was in the news, right, had ransomware.
Yeah,
that's it. The whole hospital was paralyzed. That's a major concern, right?
Yeah.
And maybe if we have to expand the SDGs, the cybersecurity has to be expanded a bit further. The impact of fake information, which actually, the deep fakes, they look at it's real. So the world around you through the lens of a screen looks real, but it's fake. That also should be part of maybe cybersecurity at some point.
Danny, do you have any...
Manipulation of elections. I mean, we can go on and on, right? It's a real concern.
Danny, do you have any thoughts on that? On the sort of on the cyber security issues?
Yeah, I mean, couldn't agree more with what Rodrigo's saying. I mean, we've been investing in cybersecurity for 5+ years now for a lot of these reasons. We have two very, very strong portfolio companies of ours in our third fund, because we believe so strongly in the importance of cybersecurity as all of the major trends we're seeing today. I mean, there's some really frightening examples of both physical, which cybersecurity obviously doesn't protect against, but also obviously cyber attacks to infrastructure on the grid, right? And as much as we can, protect, through the OT side, both the IT side, and separation between the physical system and the IT system, sophisticated attackers will continue to attack, and there's some pretty scary statistics out there. How many attacks large utilities see, and what are the implications? I mean, the grid, at least in the U.S. and in Europe, are very interconnected, right? And there are some very critical failure modes and failure points along these large transmission systems that have massive downstream implications. And the impact's going to be asymmetric, right? For wealthier individuals who have home backup power, have access to diesel generators, have access to solar and storage, the impact is going to be much less than others who rely on the grid for critical energy. And so I think we need to be considering the importance of the protective layer around all of the digitization of our world, and which is why we are very active as well.
I'll keep a couple more examples. France passed a new law, or announced a new law yesterday, allowing the police force to unencrypt phones of potential terrorists. Right? Apple in the US will not give it away, but we're trying to have access to all this information. And examples of this all over. We're so connected. You have to assume that anything can be listened to all the time. Right. And every other week, and it's on my Twitter, you can find it, I repost those information, like Zoom was leaking information. You could access very easily and listen on a phone without even making it ring. Right. So you have to assume that none of these devices are secure, including when you have all this speech-enabled devices now, the portals from Facebook, Alexa's Echoes. It's crazy. You have a discussion with a friend, then you go on your Instagram, you have an ad about it. I don't know if you've noticed, but I was discussing a Gégère Lecoul watch with someone the other day, and then I started getting all the Gégère Lecoul ads on Instagram. I never typed it anywhere, right? So all of this is the big realm of cybersecurity that is related to the well-being of the person and the well-being of society. So long answer to your original question, should it be part of the SDGs? Yes.
And Petra, what are your thoughts on the cybersecurity problem and the fact this is another vulnerability point in our world, another symptom of us being super interconnected?
I'm afraid I will not bring any controversial opinion here, as I am basically in line with what has been said. We come from the energy space. We have the key LP is a utility which is running nuke, which is running distribution.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Something is wrong.
Yeah, well, I don't know if there are any listeners anymore, but what I wanted to say is just to confirm all the ideas said here about cybersecurity. We ourselves invested in CyberX, in the industrial cybersecurity firm in Israel, which I mentioned as our successful exit to Microsoft. So we do see a big area for concern here.
Yeah, thank you for coming back. As we were talking about cybersecurity issues, we were all thrown out of the room to underscore how big a possible threat it really is. We've got 3.5 minutes left or so. I thought we'd just try and make some sort of closing remarks about ESG. We've kind of looked at the sorts of responses we've seen of investors, or how to better integrate SDGs into investment thesis, and some of the other things that are overlooked perhaps currently, namely cybersecurity, among other things. I wondered if just to throw a question out to the floor, how much do you think ESG will become a part of our investing future as a term? Will it just be entirely integrated into our investment futures, or will we still need to sort of underline it and call it out as a necessary part of our world? What do you think?
I think they're like the emperor's new clothes. Is that an English expression?
Yes.
They should become part of everything we do, and more funds, firms are circling around this term. I don't think ESG is very marketing oriented as a term. People tend to use more impact, doesn't mean much
Yeah.
either, or sustainable, doesn't mean much either. There's been some green bashing, green washing, green whatever. I think it should be just the way we behave in business and in society, taking everything into consideration. We'll never agree on the right term for this, but at least conscious of doing good and doing good for everyone, not just for what at INSEAD they call the bottom of the pyramid, right? It's for everyone else as well, is good. So just to close off, and we're delighted that we found this purpose or mission for our firm, and we'll keep doing it.
I think for me, it's maybe a two-way answer. So first of all, I think doing ESG really pays off. I think you see a much more promising portfolio when you have this in mind. Investing in a company that really has a future because it has a climate plan or it has a social plan. And second of all, I think not everyone realizes this. So I think as long as we don't have strong regulations on this, it won't become a standard.
It won't become a standard.
It won't. I think we see the good, and the good has always been there. We see better returns, but if we don't have regulators who support this and make companies really report and act, it's not going to go mainstream yet.
We actually do on the green.
Well, sorry, Rodrigo, one second. Petra, your thoughts on that?
Not going deep into regulation, a very, very complex area and topic. I would say the end consumer matters here in our business in most cases, and I can see there a trend, and something what has been a niche is definitely, in my opinion, becoming a mainstream. And I'm very happy to be in a firm with a purpose, as Rodrigo mentioned as well. We do have the purpose, and I wish everybody to work somewhere where it has a purpose.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank all of our panelists, Petra, Carolina, and Rodrigo, and Danny before he got sent away. Thank you very much for watching, and back to the main stage. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. It was interesting to watch despite technological difficulties. And up next, we'll have a chance to hear a chat of two bright minds. So stay tuned.